Are you kidding me right now?" The words exploded across the parking lot of Riverside Shopping Center like a gunshot, sharp and aggressive enough to make shoppers 30 feet away turn and stare. Derek Matthews, 42 years old, stood beside his gleaming black BMW 750A with his phone in one hand and his key fob in the other, his face flushed red with the kind of rage that comes from someone who believes the entire world exists to inconvenience him personally. He wore a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, Italian leather shoes that clicked authoritatively on asphalt, and a Rolex that caught the afternoon sunlight with expensive precision. He represented a particular type of successful professional who had confused wealth with worth and authority with respect. Before him, carefully maneuvering a 15-year-old Honda Accord into the last available handicap parking space, was James Sullivan, 71 years old, moving with the deliberate precision of someone for whom every physical action required conscious effort and caused varying degrees of pain. The Honda was clean, but showed its age in faded paint and small door dings collected over years of use. More importantly, hanging from the rearview mirror was a blue handicap placard, clearly visible and properly displayed. But Derek Matthews either didn't see it or didn't care, because his entire focus had narrowed to a single furious point. Someone had taken the parking space he had been circling toward, and that someone needed to understand they had made a serious mistake. James completed his parking maneuver and turned off his engine, reaching for the cane that rested against the passenger seat. The cane was military issue, standard aluminum with a quad base, showing wear from daily use. His movements were slow and methodical as he opened the driver's door and began the careful process of getting out, a process that involved shifting his weight, positioning the cane, and using both the doorframe and the cane for support. Derek stormed toward the Honda before James had even fully exited the vehicle, his expensive shoes slapping the pavement with angry authority. "Hey! Hey! I was waiting for that spot. I've been circling this lot for 10 minutes. His voice carried across the parking area, drawing even more attention. Several shoppers stopped loading groceries into their cars to watch what was clearly about to become an ugly confrontation. James slowly straightened to his full height, which was several inches shorter than Derek, his body showing the careful balance of someone who had learned through painful trial and error exactly how to distribute weight to minimize discomfort. He wore simple clothes, a faded navy ball cap, a plain gray t-shirt, khaki cargo pants, and New Balance walking shoes with the kind of heavy orthopedic modifications that suggested serious mobility issues. His face was weathered and lined, showing decades of sun exposure and the particular kind of aging that comes from chronic pain. "I'm sorry, son," James said quietly, his voice carrying a slight southern accent. "I didn't know you were waiting. I have a handicap placard." He gestured toward the blue card hanging from his rearview mirror, clearly visible through the windshield. The apology and the evidence should have ended the confrontation immediately. A reasonable person would have seen the placard, recognized their error, and moved on with a muttered apology. But Derek Matthews was not, in that moment, a reasonable person. He was a man who had been stuck in traffic for 40 minutes, had missed a conference call because of it, and now saw this elderly man in his aging Honda as a symbol of everything that had gone wrong with his day. "Oh, please," Derek said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You can walk just fine. I saw you get out of your car. You're not handicapped, you're just lazy and taking advantage of the system. People like you make me sick, stealing spots from people who actually need them." The accusation was so absurd, so divorced from observable reality, that several nearby witnesses actually gasped. James was literally standing there with a medical-grade cane, his body posture showing obvious physical difficulty, and the legally issued handicap placard was right there in plain view. But Derek had committed to his narrative and couldn't back down without losing face. "Sir, I assure you, this placard is legitimate," James said, his voice still patient but showing the first signs of strain. "I have severe mobility issues from injuries sustained in—" "I don't care about your sob story," Derek interrupted, pulling out his phone. "I'm calling the police right now to report handicap placard fraud. You're going to lose that fake permit and probably get a fine. Maybe that'll teach you not to steal parking spots from people who actually contribute to society." He made a show of dialing, his fingers jabbing at the screen with theatrical aggression. What Derek didn't know was that his wish was about to be granted in a way he absolutely didn't anticipate. One of the shoppers who had stopped to watch the confrontation was Officer Maria Santos, off-duty and in civilian clothes, but carrying a very clear sense of what was happening. She recognized James Sullivan immediately, and her face went pale as she understood the magnitude of what she was witnessing. She pulled out her own phone and made a call of her own, her voice urgent. "Captain Reed, this is Santos. I'm at Riverside Shopping Center, and there's a situation you need to see. It involves Mr. Sullivan." The response on the other end was immediate and forceful. Captain Thomas Reed, 48 years old and 26 years into his career with the Municipal Police Department, was in his office less than 2 miles away. The moment he heard James Sullivan's name in connection with the confrontation, he was on his feet and moving toward the door. "I'm 3 minutes out. Keep eyes on the situation." Back in the parking lot, Derek had completed his call to 911 and was now standing with his arms crossed, blocking James's path toward the store entrance. "Police are on their way," he announced loudly to his audience. "They're going to sort this out, and you're going to be in serious trouble for your fraud." James had stopped trying to reason with the angry man and was simply waiting with the patience of someone who had dealt with far worse things in his life than an entitled businessman having a tantrum. His weight rested heavily on his cane, and subtle signs of pain were beginning to show in the tightness around his eyes. Standing for extended periods was difficult, and this confrontation was taking its toll. Other shoppers had begun to intervene verbally. An elderly woman called out, "Leave him alone. He has a handicap placard." A young man with a grocery cart said, "Dude, back off. You're being a jerk." But Derek was too committed to his position to back down, and the growing audience only made him more defensive and aggressive. "Oh, so now everyone's an expert on handicap regulations," he shot back. "I'm protecting the rights of actually disabled people by calling out this fraud." The sound of a police siren approaching at high speed cut through the parking lot noise. Derek's expression shifted to smug satisfaction. Justice was coming, and this faker was about to learn an expensive lesson. The police cruiser that screamed into the parking lot wasn't a regular patrol unit, but rather the captain's personal vehicle, a marked SUV with full emergency equipment. It came to a sharp stop in the fire lane directly beside the confrontation, and Captain Thomas Reed emerged before the vehicle had fully stopped rocking on its suspension. Reed was an imposing figure, 6 feet 2 inches of solid authority, wearing his full-duty uniform with captain's bars gleaming on the collar and a chest full of commendations that represented a distinguished career. His face showed controlled fury as he took in the scene. James Sullivan leaning heavily on his cane, Derek Matthews standing in aggressive posture, and a crowd of witnesses watching with varying expressions of concern and anticipation. Reed walked directly to James, and without acknowledging Derek's existence, came to attention and saluted. The gesture was so formal, so laden with respect and military precision, that the entire parking lot went silent. "Mr. Sullivan," Reed said, his voice carrying clearly across the space. "Sir, I apologize for whatever you've been subjected to here. Are you all right?" James returned the salute with the casual ease of someone for whom the gesture was deeply ingrained muscle memory despite decades away from active service. "I'm fine, Tom. Just a misunderstanding." Derek's confident expression had begun to crack as he processed what he was seeing. A police captain had just saluted this elderly man with obvious profound respect. Something was very wrong with Derek's understanding of the situation. "Captain," Derek began, trying to reclaim control of the narrative, "I called to report this man for handicap placard fraud. He's clearly not disabled and is taking up a space that—" Reed's head turned toward Derek with the slow, deliberate movement of a predator identifying prey. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of cold authority that made even innocent bystanders take a step back. "You did what?" Derek swallowed hard but pressed forward. "He's committing fraud. Look at him, he can walk fine. That placard is probably fake, and I want him cited for— Stop talking, Reed interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut steel. Stop talking right now before you make this exponentially worse for yourself. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket and flipped it open, reading from notes that were clearly personal rather than official. James Sullivan, retired Gunnery Sergeant, United States Marine Corps. Served 3 tours in Iraq. On April 15, 2006, his convoy was hit by an IED. The blast killed his vehicle commander instantly and left Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan with traumatic amputation of his left leg below the knee, severe damage to his right leg requiring multiple reconstructive surgeries, shrapnel wounds across 60% of his body, traumatic brain injury, and bilateral hearing loss. Reed's voice grew harder with each word. He spent 18 months in Walter Reed Army Medical Center learning to walk again. He was medically retired with full disability status and awarded the Purple Heart, Bronze Star with Valor Device, and Navy Commendation Medal for his actions during the ambush, which included pulling 2 wounded Marines from a burning vehicle before allowing anyone to treat his own injuries. The captain closed his notebook and looked at Derek with open contempt. That handicap placard isn't fake. It's issued by the Department of Veterans Affairs specifically for veterans with service-connected mobility disabilities. Mr. Sullivan has earned every single right associated with that placard through blood, pain, and sacrifice that you clearly cannot begin to comprehend. Derek's face had gone from red with anger to pale with dawning horror. He opened his mouth several times, but no words came out. His expensive suit and watch suddenly felt like costumes, hollow markers of status that meant nothing in the face of genuine sacrifice. Reed wasn't finished. He gestured toward the parking space James had taken. And this particular parking spot? The one you're so angry about. Read the sign. Everyone turned to look at the designated handicap parking sign, which was standard blue and white with the wheelchair symbol. But mounted directly above it was a second sign, smaller and more personal. It read, Reserved for Gunnery Sergeant James Sullivan, USMC, Red Unearned, in honor of Corporal Michael Reed, KIA Iraq 2006. Reed's voice broke slightly as he continued. Corporal Michael Reed was my son. He was the vehicle commander killed in that IED blast. Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan tried to save him, pulled him from the burning vehicle despite his own catastrophic injuries. My son was already gone. But Mr. Sullivan didn't know that. He tried anyway, while he was literally on fire himself. The city designated this parking space in Mr. Sullivan's honor 5 years ago at my request, because this shopping center is closest to his home, and he does his grocery shopping here. The parking lot had gone absolutely silent, except for the distant sound of traffic. Several people in the crowd were crying, including Officer Santos, who had made the original call. Derek Matthews looked like he wanted the earth to open up and swallow him. His entire body seemed to shrink as the full weight of his error crashed down on him. I didn't, he stammered weakly. You didn't know, Reed agreed coldly. You didn't know because you didn't care to know. You saw an elderly man in an old car and made assumptions. You saw someone you perceived as less important than yourself and decided they didn't deserve basic courtesy or respect. You were so convinced of your own righteousness that you couldn't see the evidence literally hanging in front of your face. Reed pulled out his citation book. I could charge you with harassment, disturbing the peace, and making a false report to 911. I could make your day significantly worse than it already is. But Mr. Sullivan has asked me to show grace where he received none. James had been silent through the captain's explanation, but now he spoke quietly. Tom, the young man made a mistake. I've made plenty of mistakes in my life. Let him go with a warning and a lesson learned. Reed looked at James with visible frustration, mixed with deep respect. Sir, he was cruel to you. He deserves consequences. Maybe, James agreed, but mercy is more powerful than punishment sometimes. Let him think about what happened here. That'll be consequence enough. The captain clearly disagreed but deferred to James's wishes. He turned back to Derek with barely controlled anger. Mr. Sullivan is showing you grace you don't deserve. You're free to go with a warning. But let me be very clear. If I ever hear of you treating any veteran, any disabled person, or anyone else with this kind of disrespect again, I will make it my personal mission to ensure you face every legal consequence available. Do you understand?" Derek nodded mutely, unable to meet anyone's eyes. He walked back to his BMW on shaking legs, got in, and drove away without another word. Several people in the crowd had been recording on their phones, and the video would go viral within hours, generating millions of views and becoming a case study in the danger of assumptions and the power of grace. James Sullivan completed his grocery shopping that day with Captain Reed insisting on accompanying him, helping him load his car, and following him home to ensure he arrived safely. The interaction between them showed the bonds that form between people, connected by shared tragedy and mutual respect. The designated parking space at Riverside Shopping Center became a minor landmark, a place where people would occasionally leave flowers or small American flags in honor of both Corporal Reed and Gunnery Sergeant Sullivan. And Derek Matthews, though he never returned to that shopping center, did learn his lesson. He began volunteering at a veterans organization and dedicated significant time and money to supporting disabled veterans. He never spoke publicly about the parking lot incident, but those who knew him saw a fundamental change in how he treated people, particularly those he might once have dismissed as beneath his notice. Where are you watching from today? Tell us in the comments about a time when making assumptions taught you an important lesson. Subscribe to Hidden Legends for more stories proving that heroes deserve respect, not judgment.